I don't want to bore you any further, but I thought nevertheless to just make a few points and maybe more ask a few questions. This is one of my favorite Eurofound data, if I can say, or graphs or illustrations, because coming from this helicopter view of a European umbrella organization, we don't have the luxury to go into regional or city or local levels to really look at practices and implementation. We have to keep this European overview. And if you look at this graph, try to remember a little bit the colors. This is the explanation of the really great differences that exist between the regions of Europe in terms of their culture, their history, their approach to the issues of gender, of work-life balance, of care. And let me just go back here again, and you see, of course, the Scandinavian countries. What I find always very interesting is when we go, for example, to Hungary or Romania and start talking about these issues. It's a very different galaxy. And when we go to the Netherlands or we are here in Finland, it's another galaxy. And you think, oh, I cannot tell you anything new, I cannot tell. So the real challenge, I think, for COFACE is to find in this European reconciliation package some kind of pointers that will, drive home the point in as many countries and stakeholders as possible, and how can we create a kind of a unified approach to this. This is another issue that I always like to go back to, and this is coming from a Belgian researcher, Caroline Clozon, but it also figures in the book of Barbara Hobson, these spheres of our lives and how now with the technology these spheres are blurring. The fact that work no longer happens at the workplace during working time. Actually, if you are working in the kind of environment I am, in an office environment, there are so many distractions during the day. You can hardly get any work done anymore in the day. You need to do this in the evening or on weekends. So the work seems to flow out, and yet you have your private life, you have your family issues. Sisi, it's a shame she's gone, she mentioned this example of employees can bring in the ironing or the cleaning into the company and they will do it for them. Well, in this context, it means that your workplace invites you to bring your private sphere into your workplace. And this is the same for the Googles and the Prezi offices, those wonderful, colorful and comfortable offices that offer the massage and the laundry and the cook and the paninis that you can eat at midnight when you're still at work. I believe that we should give the flexibility and the autonomy to the workers to take care of their private spheres in their own time, in their own place, and not necessarily bring it in. And we haven't spoken a lot about volunteering or political engagement or the civic life, which is so important, especially to the European fabric, this European democracy of people taking an interest in their community for the vulnerable. So these are the three. I mentioned a little bit about identity, but we haven't really spoken about power, that when you're in a work relationship, there is a power relationship between you and your bosses or between you and your staff. If your livelihood depends on it, if your mortgage depends on it, if your childcare cost depends on your work, you are not going to jeopardize this by bringing out negotiation for your working time. And one very interesting aspect is that men negotiate their salaries and women negotiate their working times. Working Family is a UK-based, another UK-based NGO. They called job ads, I think hundreds of job ads that were advertised full-time. And they asked on the phone, would you consider giving this job also part-time or flexible? And most of the overwhelming number said yes. But we just don't ask. We go in there in this power relationship, and it's very difficult to sit at the table to negotiate. So I think we understand that this is a big, big puzzle where you have many pieces of the HR and of the business strategy and the child care and the elderly care. And these puzzles are not the same. So we need to find these individual pieces, and this is what makes it very, very complex. I'm very strongly feeling about the issue of equality. We are living in a situation of growing inequalities. We see the top 1%, the top 0.1% getting richer and richer, and the middle class getting poorer and poorer, stagnating wages. There's a big gap between these two layers of society. And if we only offer these work-life balance measures for already the highly skilled, the computer-based, the most educated, then we are contributing to the growing of these inequalities. So we need to look at bakers, at doctors, at nurses, as teachers, but also people working in shops, people working in very precarious environments and jobs, to help and use this opportunity to redress some of these imbalances. Work-life balance works really well if you have a good diversity of people in your workplace. If everybody on your payroll are young mothers, then they will all want to go at the same time to the childcare and go home at the same time. But if you have a greater diversity between men and women, between ages, between life situations, then they will be able to negotiate among themselves the times, because you may then effectively have someone who would like to work earlier to early afternoon and someone who would be happy to stay there longer, or someone who would even like to work on the weekends. What I find also very interesting is that these programs that we need to implement are two or multiple generation programs, yet policy is very segregated. It means that you have one policy and one department for early childhood, you have another policy or another department for women at work, and you have a third one for elders, and then one more maybe for men. We need to pull the levers of the same policies. If you have a good early childhood care system, this will also benefit working women. So it's generations between carers and cared for persons. This is almost my last slide. I listened to a very interesting discussion on the radio where they said there are three kinds of jobs. 40% of jobs are going to be robotized or automatized in the next couple of years. They will disappear. There's another batch of jobs that is going to be outsourced to India, to China, which is already happening, to developing countries. And there's going to be a third category of jobs that is going to change. We don't have the same career patterns that we used to have, where you started one job and you retired from the same job 30 years later. We need to reinvent perpetually our jobs, and this is entrepreneurship. It means that you need to be entrepreneurially minded to change your job, but also to change your working conditions. And this requires a very different mindset from just an executive mindset. I also think that Ariella Huffington, Sheryl Sandberg, Marissa Mayer are very good examples, are very strong women who I think lead the way in this, but we also need male role models. We need more media, we need more breaking this taboo of, yes, it's really difficult. It's very hard to have children, but also wanting a career and being ambitious, wanting time with our families, in our volunteering, in our youth club or sports club, and be performant at work. But I think that if we can manage to bring this out more in the open, to have more media attention, then somehow slowly this culture change is going to happen. And I think that, and I don't know if you're going to say this, Helena, but maybe I'm just going to, kill your bird with a stone, but I was surprised you didn't say it this morning. You said it a couple of times that nobody can do everything.
Well, you are stealing my words. Don't say that. You are crazy. Ágnes.
Okay, I'll leave you to finish this sentence, but I think you can start it, and it's like a box where if you push this way, something will come up this way. You motivate your employees, you give them more flexibility, give them more freedom, and something will happen. And I'm convinced that it will happen for the better. So thank you very much.
Could I just follow up the EU thing for one moment? Because it would be a bit unfair if I didn't say how pleased I am that progress funding has gone to Eurocarers this year as well as to COFACE. And that is important in keeping the European and generating the European debate. And there's clearly support for databases and research. But what you read is how the European social funds, the really big bits of money, can be applied to support the kind of initiatives that we're talking about today. And maybe it's that I haven't seen where that information is being collected, or maybe the information is not being collected systematically. But if it is, you would know, wouldn't you?
Yes, thank you. It's very fragmented, this information, and that's where the big bucks are. You're right, that's where the big money is. So thank you for this homework.
But I think it's quite important when somebody says, how does the EU support, that we collect the information, because that's significant funding.
Yeah. So without further ado, Helena, please take the floor to close this conference.